Fellow St. Lucians, citizens, ladies and gentlemen, good evening to one and all. In all the years that I've had the honor to serve you as Prime Minister, the issues on which I am about to address you have been among the most challenging and difficult. This is so for three reasons. Firstly, they call for extremely tough, courageous but necessary decisions. Secondly, the matters in question have tarnished the reputation of our country and brought considerable dishonor to our police force both at home and abroad. Thirdly, the issues touch a raw nerve, our battle against crime, violence, and lawlessness in our midst. It is therefore ironic that I am addressing you on this subject at this juncture, when for the first time in more than a decade, we have not had a homicide in January or February. All of this will be better understood if I place the issues in their proper context. In so doing, I will have to repeat some information which was the subject of a previous address to you on August 30th, 2014. This is necessary not simply to remind you of the facts of the matter, but equally to help you to better appreciate the complexity of the problem that faces us. First, let me remind you of the background which brought us to this point. During the period between 2008 and 2010, St. Lucia experienced an unprecedented wave of homicides and violent crimes, particularly in the northern half of the island. Our citizens were deeply disturbed by these horrific crimes and the seeming helplessness of our law enforcement agencies to bring them under control. On May 30th, 2010, in an address to the nation, former Prime Minister Stephen King launched what became known as Operation Restore Confidence, ostensibly to restore confidence in the police force and to provide a safer environment for the citizens of St. Lucia. The former Prime Minister warned criminals that, quote, there will be no refuge, no stone will be left unturned, and there will be no hiding place for anyone, unquote. The former Prime Minister announced the formation of a special task force of police officers and a change in the command structure of the Royal St. Lucia Police Force. The Commissioner of Police, Mr. Osbert Regis, was transferred, albeit unlawfully, and replaced by Assistant Commissioner of Police for Crime, Mr. Vernon Francois, initially in an acting capacity. Mr. Francois was subsequently confirmed in his position by my administration. Several other appointments were made, but for the purposes of this address, it is not necessary to mention them here. The task force quickly became fully operational. It was placed under the direct command of the Deputy Commissioner of Police in charge of operations, Mr. Moses Charles. When these decisions were taken, ministerial responsibility for the police was assigned to the former Minister of Home Affairs, Senator Guy Myers, who briefed the public on the changes effected by his government. Between 2010 and 2011, 12 persons met their deaths following encounters with officers of the Royal St. Lucia Police Force. The largest number of the civilian casualties occurred in the Castries Basin, allegedly during the execution of duly authorized search warrants. These deaths attracted the attention of the United States of America, among others. In their country report on human rights practice in St. Lucia for 2011, the U.S. State Department reported, among other things, that, quote, the most serious human rights problems included reports of unlawful police killings, unquote. The same report added that there were 12 potentially unlawful fatal police shootings during the year, unquote. Consequent on the State Department's report, the United States government proceeded to apply to St. Lucia what has come to be widely known as the Leahy Law. There are three key provisions of this law appearing in different acts, all of which are of concern to us. The first states that, quote, no assistance shall be furnished to any unit of the security forces of a foreign country if the Secretary of State has credible information that such unit has committed a gross violation of human rights. The second goes on to say, quote, none of the funds made available by this act may be used to support any training program involving a unit of the security forces of a foreign country if the Secretary of Defense has received credible information from the Department of State that the unit has committed a gross violation of human rights, unless all necessary corrective steps have been taken, unquote. The third provision states that where funds are withheld from any unit, the Secretary of State shall promptly inform the foreign government of the basis for such action and shall, to the maximum extent practicable, assist the foreign government in taking effective measures to bring the responsible members of the security forces to justice. Upon application of these foregoing provisions, the United States ceased all financial and technical assistance to our Coast Guard. This meant that the government of St. Lucia was now solely responsible for the maintenance of its Coast Guard fleet. Other sanctions soon followed. The government of St. Lucia could not purchase ammunition from the United States for its American-made weapons. Members of the Royal St. Lucia Police Force could no longer participate in training programs sponsored or financed by the United States. Our police officers were also denied participation in training activities in the Regional Security System, RSS, our own regional organization, once the training program was sponsored or financed by the United States. There were still more consequences. The visa of the former Deputy Commissioner of Police, Moses Charles, was revoked. It is to be recalled that he was in charge of operations when the alleged extrajudicial killings took place. Further, though the visa of the Commissioner of Police, Vernon Francois, was not revoked, he was nonetheless denied entry to the United States, even to attend security meetings with officials of the United States. The stark reality we confront is that the United States will only lift those sanctions if, in their judgment, quote, all necessary corrective steps have been taken, unquote. The fact remains that for a tainted unit or member of such a unit to become eligible for training again, the Secretary of State must determine and report to the United States Congress that the government of the affected country, in this case St. Lucia, is taking effective steps to bring the responsible members of the security forces to justice. In effect, if the sanctions are to be removed, we must show proof that we are taking corrective steps to deal with the situation. Faced with these very serious national security issues and the urgent need to confront a problem that was compromising the integrity of our country, I announced on August 30th, 2014, that the government had secured through the CARICOM Implementation Agency for Crime and Security Impacts the services of a team of investigators from the Jamaican Constabulary Force to investigate all instances of alleged extrajudicial killings by members of the Royal St. Lucia Police Force. The team comprised 8 investigators. Included among them were a ballistic expert, a legal advisor, a data entry specialist, a cybercrime analyst, and detectives investigators. Since the receipt of the report, the Cabinet of Ministers has been studying its implications and recommendations. A copy of the report has also been shared with the United States government. There are those who glibly suggested that the government simply make the report a public document. Others have pronounced that we lack the courage to implement, in total, the findings of the report. I reiterate that neither this Prime Minister nor the government that I have the honor to lead will shirk its responsibilities in ensuring that our country abides by the rule of law. I will state some of these findings tonight to bring home to you the extreme gravity of this matter. I cannot and will not discuss or review the evidential basis of the conclusions of the investigators. The matter of pursuing criminal charges is the preserve of the Director of Public Prosecutions, and it is she who will pronounce on the same once her actions are consistent with our Constitution. Our Constitution enshrines three separate arms of the state: the executive, legislative, and the judicial. I will not allow the executive, which I lead, to transgress the province of the other two arms. I intend to fully continue respecting that sacred separation. That said, I can report that the findings of the investigators are extremely damning. I will state some of these findings tonight to bring home to you the extreme gravity of this matter. These findings relate not only to those officers who were involved in the operations, but additionally, members of the high command of the police force who may have been involved in covering up these matters. The report confirms that the blacklists or death lists referenced by the media, human rights organizations, victims' families, and citizens alike did exist. More alarmingly, the investigators report that all the shootings reviewed were fake encounters staged by the police to legitimize their actions. Further, that the weapons supposedly found on the scene of the alleged extrajudicial killings were from sources other than the victims. The investigators say that the weapons were planted on the scene of the shootings. The investigators also advise that a number of shootings were done by police officers and are listed on the murder statistic as being done by unknown assailants. Revealingly, the report suggests that, quote, the crime problem in St. Lucia is facilitated by corrupt politicians, government officials, business persons, and police officers, unquote. Of serious concern, too, is the fact that the investigators also reported that in the course of the investigation, some senior officers did not cooperate with them. They reported that the main server of the computers used by some members of the high command of the police force was deliberately tampered with. In 2 instances, the operating systems of the computers were altered to place the supposed contents beyond the timeline of the investigation or probe. The report has also recommended that some senior police officers be held accountable for their actions or for their failure to take appropriate action when the alleged killings occurred. The investigators also concluded that what operated during the period under review, quote, was an environment of impunity and pervasiveness designed to achieve the desired results. Willful blindness existed in respect of the Commissioner of Police and particular members of his leadership and management team, unquote. The investigators have recommended that, quote, all police officers involved in the unlawful killings of citizens in respect of the files reviewed must be prosecuted, unquote. In all, the investigators made some 31 recommendations, many of which touch on the management and administration of the police force. I have already said and I repeat it here, that it is not for me personally or the government collectively or any minister individually to make any judgment about the innocence or guilt of anyone who may be implicated by the findings of this report. The question whether anyone is to be prosecuted is solely for the Director of Public Prosecutions to determine after evaluating and assessing the probative value of the evidence placed before her. Likewise, it is for the courts to pronounce on the innocence or guilt of any person who may be charged. The most that the executive arm of the government can do is to provide the resources to the Director of Public Prosecutions to carry out the duties and the responsibilities assigned to her by our Constitution. A copy of the report has now been made available to her. For the above reasons, save for some administrative adjustments that have now become necessary in the high command of the police force, I am not here, nor will I order that police officers be charged or dismissed or offered packages to retire from the police force. The most fundamental question that faces us at this juncture is perhaps the most simple and obvious one. Where do we go from here? There can be no question that our relationship with the United States is vital both to our security and to the security of the United States. We cannot allow a situation where the chief custodian of our national security and other senior police officers in the high command of the police force cannot travel to the United States for discussions on our shared security interests. Equally, it cannot be in the interests of our police force, and I dare say our country itself, that the skills of our officers cannot be improved because they are denied access to training once American sponsorship or funds are involved. More fundamentally, we cannot continue in a situation where we are viewed as a pariah state by our partners in the fight against crime and lawlessness. There is perhaps no subject of cooperation between states that require trust more than cooperation in security matters. Clearly, therefore, we need to address the issues that arise from the application of the Leahy Law, and I do so now. Firstly, the government has decided that the training of police recruits will henceforth include a module in human rights law. All current police officers will be required in rotation to attend training to sensitize them to the human rights provisions of our Constitution. Secondly, in order to strengthen the pool of gazetted officers, the government, in consultation with the police force and our partners, will organize and conduct an accelerated training program for potential promotion to the ranks of gazetted officers. Admission to this program will be done on a competitive basis. Additionally, we will augment the institutional capacity of the police force by increasing the assistant commissioner positions by 1, increasing the number of funded sergeant positions by 5, and the number of funded corporal positions by 10. Thirdly, we will make provision in this year's estimates of expenditure for the appointment of special prosecutors to assist in the prosecution of any cases should the Director of Prosecutions so decide to prosecute. Fourthly, the Cabinet will appoint a joint committee under my chairmanship to oversee the implementation of the report of the investigators. The committee will include representatives of the Royal St. Lucia Police Force and civilians. Finally, The substantive Commissioner of Police, Mr. Vernon Francois, who is currently on leave, will continue on leave until his current period of leave expires. Mr. Errol Alexander will continue to act as Commissioner during this period. I wish to make it clear, however, that there will be personnel adjustments within the police force as we seek to effectively manage this transition and ensure optimal functioning of the police force. It is vital that this transition is orderly, peaceful, and in accordance with our laws and practices. Earlier, I made it clear that it is neither the place nor the occasion for this government to pronounce the innocence or the guilt of anyone. Accordingly, after consideration of the contents of the report, the Cabinet of Ministers has decided that it is not in the public interest to make this report public at this time. Already, there has been some unwarranted and outrageous speculation and commentary on the contents of the report. Disclosure of the report would compromise continued investigations, place the lives of potential witnesses at risk, and prejudice unfairly those who could face prosecution. The report relies on information provided by persons who spoke on condition of anonymity, and we must at all costs protect the identity of the witnesses who spoke to the investigators. Though these witnesses are not identified in the report, the evidence contained therein could give clues of their identity. Further, disclosure would mean that those who may have done wrong will have advanced warning of who said what, to whom, about what, when, why, and where. It is best, therefore, that disclosure awaits the filing of charges, if any, and the ensuing legal processes. The wounds arising out of this investigation will be deep. For nearly 5 years, our police officers have been the subject of intense scrutiny locally, regionally, and internationally. Our police officers are human beings, and they will feel deeply hurt and distressed by the findings of this investigation. They would wish for this to come to an end at the earliest. So too will the relatives of the victims want closure, and if the results warrant this, justice for their loved ones. The investigators have advised, and we concur, that, quote, there is a strong need for victims to speak about their experiences. A credible national process in the form of transformative justice is required. Justice for victims, accountability, and punishment of the perpetrators are essential elements of such a process, unquote. In all of this, we must remember that the vast majority of the men and women in our police force are decent, dedicated, and committed police officers. Now more than ever, we need to rally around them as we all manage the outcome of this investigation. Those who believe that they can take advantage of this situation will be disappointed. I wish to assure all of our citizens that our police force will implement measures to ensure that the rule of law prevails and is respected. The criminal elements should not feel encouraged or emboldened by this report or any actions that may be taken as a result of the investigations. Our government remains resolute in its pursuit of a safer and more secure country, and we will employ all necessary lawful measures to ensure the security of our state and its citizens. My fellow St. Lucians, ladies and gentlemen, as I stated at the commencement of this address, this was a distressing issue to confront. Its complexity was compounded by the fact that our government knows that there are many among us who welcome the actions taken during Operation Restore Confidence, as they saw these actions as being largely responsible for the abatement in violent crime that followed. But we are a people and a government governed by laws, and no matter how serious the problem may appear, we must never abandon our responsibility to do what is legally and morally correct. As a former commissioner of police once said, we cannot commit a crime to solve a crime. My government has done its part, and in the words of Lord Mansfield, which words were once echoed by former Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Alan Louisi, let justice be done, though the heavens fall. Let us pray for God's guidance and blessings as our nation faces our challenges, continues on its journey of peace, development, and enlightenment. Good night to one and all.